back here on the drums. Okay, Willie. This young man comes from the great state of Texas. Will you give a nice hand for wonderful Willie Cantu?
This is the San Joaquin Sound Podcast, the podcast about music in Bakersfield and the surrounding San Joaquin Valley. I'm your host, AJ Rodriguez. This is part one in a series of 3 episodes. They were all recorded over the past couple months over the phone with Willie Cantu, the drummer in Buck Owens and the Buckaroos' classic lineup in the 1960s. Part 1 covers his time growing up in Corpus Christi, Texas, and eventually joining the Buckaroos, and some of his first experiences as he moved to Bakersfield. Part 2 covers his time with Buck Owens and the Buckaroos, touring the world and recording hit after hit. Part 3 covers his exit from the band and his subsequent journey in studying a bunch of other types of music, like Ghanaian drumming and Scottish pipe band drumming, and even opening for Alice Cooper. So you were born in Corpus Christi, Texas in May of 1946?
That's correct.
This is a special interview for me to even talk to you right now because my grandpa, he grew up in Kingsville, Texas.
Okay.
Which wasn't too far, and so did my grandma. My grandma and Grandpa Rodriguez, who they're both passed away now, but my grandpa loved Buck Owens, and my grandparents grew up in Texas. He would be so happy that I was talking to you. I just feel like honored to be speaking with you, you know? It's cool.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure talking to you.
What was it like growing up in Texas for you?
Well, I didn't know anything else.
What are your first memories of music?
The parades that happened once a year in, I guess, the month of May, I believe. There's a celebration called Buccaneer Days. And supposedly, back in the 1800s, the pirates used to land in Corpus quite often. I think Galveston, further north along the coast there, was also a pirate area. Because of that celebration, it used to be like a whole week of festivities, like a carnival was the big thing. Through the school system, mainly for music, the marching bands would come to Corpus from different parts of the state to compete in the Buccaneer Days festivities, and they would compete as concert bands. Pretty well the competition was held at the junior college, which was in Corpus. Del Mar Junior College it was. I just had a flash of Buccaneer Days and sitting on the street side watching the bands go by and just listening to that thunderous sound of marching snare drums that I love so dearly. I treasure those days because I can still relive the way I felt, the way the drums and the music made me feel, you know, in the night, you know, and the excitement of band after band and, you know, the parades and stuff. But I was going to say also, I told you about the junior high school band being Winfield Junior High School Buckaroos. So I was a Buckaroo then, and then I became a Buccaneer, and then I became a Buck Owens Buckaroo, 3 times a buck. I just kind of I get a kick out of that, and my friends can't believe that little story, but that actually happened to me. You know, who else can say that?
You're definitely the only one.
So that's what I remember the most is going as a boy. My parents used to we would go watch the parade. And the most exciting thing for me was to hear the drum cadence of each of the marching bands marching by, you know, and the music of the marching band. That's the very first thing that I recall. And so, but I got to play in the parade, you know, when I was in junior high school and in high school. That was my biggest thrill, was playing in the marching band. And so that's how that started. My dad loved music and he loved to dance. So on Leopard Street, there above the stores that were lined up,
Yeah.
there was also an upper level of the businesses, and there was one place called La Terraza. They used to have it was like a big dance hall, and my dad used to frequent that. Not every weekend, but from time to time. My mom did not dance; she wouldn't dance. She didn't like it, but we would all go and watch Dad dance. My dad grew up in Mexico. He's actually from the Valley. He's the only one in his family of 12 that actually was born in the States, but he grew up in Mexico. My
Yeah.
mom was Mexican as well, but she was born in Texas. And so whatever music they played on the radio, and it's usually Tejano music, that's what I grew up listening to. And
Yeah.
also, when we'd go to the theater to see Mexican movies, my dad and I mainly, it was all mariachi. You know, the movies were pretty stereotyped, and they all had the same kind of thing where the main actor uh, would sing in a bar room while he was getting drunk.
Yeah.
And there was usually a mariachi backing him up. So that's the sound that I grew up with. Say, for example, over at one of my aunts, she had the radio going on all the time. And then I heard a different type of music, which is a Tejano, Conjunto. I don't know if you know what a conjunto is.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, it consisted of a bass guitar, which was called a bajo sexto, and a rhythm guitar or an accordion, okay, and a drummer that just had like a bass drum and a snare drum.
Yeah.
No, none of the other stuff that other music's required. And so a lot of times they were like trio or quartet, and they played Texas style Mexican music. I don't know if that would be considered norteño music, but that style had been around from the early 1900s, I understand. And the accordion, which was actually a German instrument, there were a lot of German in Central Texas, so that became adopted, into the Tejano music. I used to watch the conjunto bands play, and I always felt in my mind that I loved it so much that I thought that I could just go up, sit at the drums, and play what the drummer was doing, even though I had no clue. But it just seemed like a natural thing for me that I felt I could do. Also, one of my aunts, one of my mom's older sisters, also used to kind of take care of me and my sister, just me and my sister. She's 5 years younger than me.
Yeah.
We would go stay with her in the afternoon sometimes. And so she always had Tejano music on the radio while she was like ironing or cooking or doing her chores. She would be listening. She loved to listen to Tejano music, and so therefore I got exposed there. But also I remember hearing a lot of Tejano music with the saxophone as the lead voice, not just the accordion. And so that was another influence. That sound. That's what I was. That's what I grew up listening to until we got a television and Ed Sullivan show that exposed me to other musics, and
Yeah.
that's where I first heard Louis Armstrong from New Orleans. So that kind of started the seed, on listening to jazz. And then in junior high school, when I was in the marching band and concert band, a lot of the other kids that were my age group in the 8th grade and 9th grade, some of them listened to jazz, and that became my main inspiration for wanting to learn to play the drum set. And I was trying to teach myself, and then discovered a teacher at one of the school dances. He this particular drummer did church work and trying to recruit young kids to come for catechism. So this man, his name was Albert Garcia Jr., show up with my dad up in my bedroom where I was practicing with a makeshift drum set, and he heard me play, and he told me he was taught drums, and so he invited me to start learning from him, take drum lessons. And so I did that once a week. I'd walk to his home, which is quite a few, maybe a couple of miles away or so. And that's how I started actually learning drum set rhythms to all the popular rhythms at that particular time, either in Tejano music or for playing like music that you would play at a country club,
Yeah.
like playing waltzes and foxtrots and swing beats and some
Society
Latin rhythm.
music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tuxedo music. So my teacher kind of taught me all the various dance rhythms that he knew on the drum set. And after a couple of years, 2, maybe 3 years, I started going to some of the jobs with him, and then sit and listening to him play with his band, and then he'd let me sit in on the last song, and that's how I started playing within that, with a small group like that. And at the same time, like in junior high school, maybe in ninth grade, some of us in the marching band, concert band, decided to kind of form our own little band. And it was more jazzy, the records that I'd heard that some of my friends had were more like Benny Goodman and Gene Krupa. You know who Gene Krupa was?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. He was a big band drummer, and actually you've heard of Buddy Rich, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, he was older generation than Buddy Rich. And this in the late 30s, he popularized drums and the drum solo while he was with the Benny Goodman Band. There was one concert that they played in Carnegie Hall that just really caused a lot of attention to Benny Goodman's band and also to Gene because of his drum solo.
Wow, that's cool.
And what was good about that is that years later, when I was with Buck and we played Carnegie Hall, I played on that same stage as Gene Krupa, and I was just totally elated by the fact that there I was, and I was only 17 years old and already playing Carnegie Hall,
Yeah.
So that really meant a lot to me, and it was funny. My band director, junior high school band director, used to say, he used to encourage us to practice as much as we could and become the best that we could,
Yeah.
And he said he used to make this remark about, once you've played Carnegie Hall, you've made it the big time. And I remember thinking that. I'm saying, I'm only 17 and I'm playing in this place where great musicians have played, master musicians. I said, this can't be it for me. I mean, I'm playing here. And then once I did, I said, this can't be all there is to life. I mean, and years later, I mean, whenever I go home and I'd get together and visit with that particular band director, I told him, I said, I always remember this when I was at Carnegie Hall, and you saying that if you play at Carnegie Hall, you're at the top of the heap and, you can't go any higher. So I said, well, what happens now? But so you got a big kick out of that, because I think that was a rare case that one of his students, I doubt that any of the other students ever played Carnegie Hall
Yeah.
that I ever heard of. So,
Yeah, probably
but
not. I really
yeah,
liked I saw in an interview that you did that you talked about your band director having a big giant sign behind him that said
yes,
think, and I really
exactly.
thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I always remembered that, and well, to this day, I tell my students that if they can't remember to practice every day, just to put a sign up,
Yeah.
to think to practice. That was a big encouragement because there was no getting away from it. If you're in band class, you're facing you know the band director, which is at the center of the stage on a podium, and behind him is this big sign that says "Think." Day and night, it's there. So it was a great idea.
Yeah. So at this time, I also researched and you were doing barefoot shining, right? And you were
Yes,
exploring the whole city. You were never afraid you'd never stayed in one place. You loved to explore and you did that throughout your
yeah,
life.
exactly. It was just in me, and the thing, not only just me, but my friends. When we had time off, especially in the weekends, we walked everywhere. We didn't know about taking the bus or anything like this. Plus, it cost money, and I had no money. Until I started working, shining shoes, and I ended up. I built my own little shoe shine box with a foot platform, and slowly started uh, collecting waxes and shoe polishes and brushes and what have you. And off I went, probably in the 8th grade. And it's very hot down there. And so I used to walk barefoot,
Yeah.
on the hot sidewalk. And the dirt there is all more like sand. So it was pretty hot, but still it didn't matter. You just get used to it and you just walk anywhere you need to get. And so either I do it by myself or with another friend or two, and we decide just to go exploring. And it never stopped me from going anywhere that I wanted to go. I would just go and be back home for supper. And my parents would never know where I'd been. But we never got into any kind of shenanigans.
Yeah.
Everything was cool.
With some of the money that you were earning, you started buying jazz records like Ornette Coleman and Cattleball Adderley and J.J. Johnson's Blue Trombone, right? Like
Uh-huh,
you
yes.
start building up this collection and
Yeah.
really, are you trying to copy it? Like, are you playing along to the records?
No, no, I was just listening, absorbing,
Yeah.
and mainly enjoying, and trying to understand the conceptually how different that music was from the music that I grew up listening to, and also the music that I played in the marching band. I was trying to uh, find the thread that held all those styles together. It was all music, but it was all different, and
Yeah.
trying to understand how anyone would come up with such ideas, and how do I do it? And I realized that through listening and imitation is one of the ways, unless because I had nobody to teach me how to play jazz. I was doing this before my teacher came along.
Yeah.
I was already listening to Max Roach and trying to figure out, after Gene Krupa, it was Max Roach, which is a big jump from the swing era to the bebop and modern style of modern jazz, of drumming, and trying to understand the evolution of the music, mainly more than any other music, the evolution of jazz. How you could have, say, like people like Louis Armstrong, who was from New Orleans, and he had been playing jazz since the early 1900s. And then how it went from that to the Benny Goodman to the swing era, and then it progressed into the bebop era through Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. In the late 40s and through the 50s, all the next generation of beboppers, and the evolution of jazz through that into the 60s, like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley. I was trying to figure out how it could sound so different conceptually, you know.
Yeah.
And so it became a study, you know, at the same time as enjoyment, trying to develop an understanding. The main thing, what it was doing for me was appreciating a different sound, the sound of jazz, and also training my ear to accept new, different sounds and ways of playing. That's where conception comes in, you know, in terms of how you interpret the music, which is rhythmically, that was the big advancement, was rhythm and harmony, harmonically, the way tunes were phrased was different. And the drumming style was there all along in terms of stompy swing era type of playing, like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich played, into a more flowing, more legato rather than staccato type of swing. And so all of this, you know, was, you know, I was trying to analyze this and understand what the evolution of the music was.
Yeah.
And be able to recognize. I mean, I could tell there was a difference between Louis Armstrong and Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis. You know, it's real plain to hear. But and understanding what was taking place musically, notation wise, rhythmically, you know, these were challenges, and it took a long time, you know. But the main thing is first being exposed to the music before I could do anything else, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I just fell in love with it. And so that's what I really loved the most was jazz. And that is what inspired me to develop my playing to a higher level. It still does that for me, even at my age. It'll never be over until there's no life in me. That's the way I look at it. It's a lifelong endeavor. I never will know everything there is to know,
Yeah.
which is good. I don't mind that.
And that's kind of like the artist's dilemma or whatever. I don't know. I'm making this up. The name is like where you're always trying to refine your art.
Exactly.
You're never
Yeah.
happy with what you just made, and you have to go to the next thing and make a new thing.
Yes. It used to be, I used to think that it was just jazz musicians that were like that, but Buck was like that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what drove him to go beyond the sound that he developed, you know, back in the early 60s.
Yeah.
From the time that I started in the band to the time that I left, like 3.5 years later, I mean, his sound changed by the time I left. You know,
Yeah.
it was, you know, it was a big change, and that's just how he was. I was instilled with that from the very beginning. You know, be the best that you can be, and through that, there'll be no end because you're constantly searching, developing, and hopefully getting new ideas to keep moving forward, you know. But not everybody is like that. You
Yeah.
understand that?
Yeah. Not everyone has
that-
the drive to do that.
Yeah, or the gift to be a Charlie Parker or Duke Ellington or Miles Davis or John Coltrane, you know.
Yeah.
But there's room for everybody.
Yeah.
You decide your path and where you want to take it. It's as simple as that. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's good advice. So we get to 1962, but going back to 1962, I saw in the newspaper, the Corpus Christi Times or the Corpus Christi Caller Times,
Yeah.
that you are playing in the all-district band that you had to try out for marching. At the same time, there's ads for the Maison Rouge
Yeah.
jazz sessions, and you're playing with the Joe Gallardo combo.
Yeah, Joe Gallardo. That was strictly on Sundays, the jab session. And my drum teacher actually led a lot of those sessions. Joe Gallardo was a nephew of my teacher, Beto Garcia.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they It's funny. All the Mexican or Hispanic musicians in Corpus were related somehow. They were cousins or this or that. There were two generations. My teacher, Beto, he was in his mid-30s, okay? He had a regular day job at Corn Products. He loved jazz, and he came from a musical family. His dad was a drummer. His mom was also a pianist and drummer. And he had two other brothers, Peter Garcia, he was the eldest, and he played like swing style or pre-swing style drumming. And then there was Rudy, uh, and he was more from the 50s, 60s style, and Beto was from the 50s and 60s style, but not quite as adventuresome as Rudy. Okay. Rudy was into the latest thing. And he was the one that I related to the most once I had been playing for maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years. And through my recordings, we liked a lot of the same music stylistically, and the more adventuresome music. And I was kind of like a third generation in the line of drummers. Beto was in his mid-30s, Rudy was in his mid-20s, and I was like 15. There weren't any real younger musicians my age that were interested in playing jazz. There were some that liked jazz, but none of my school buddies or members in the marching or concert band had any interest in playing jazz. So I was like a rare bird, in
Yeah.
a sense. From my understanding of how things developed after I left my hometown, I was kind of like the last of the jazz players. There might have been one or two people that I never really knew, but I never heard of them. I see it as 3 generations there,
Yeah.
Well, actually, okay, so actually probably 4, because Beto's parents, who were very active, and I've seen pictures of that particular group, and it's a band like from the 1920s,
Wow.
a jazz band there in Corpus, probably styled very much like Louis Armstrong's groups that he had back then. So there was uh, Albert Garcia Sr., then Albert Garcia Jr., and then Rudy Garcia, and then me. I was the last of the line of the jazz drummers in Corpus that were really serious about it. Beto, like I said, had a day job, but Rudy Garcia, he made a living as a professional drummer, mainly playing in society bands. He used to travel and work out of town a lot, like in Houston, or say like Bowling Green, Kentucky, or maybe somewhere in Colorado. He never knew where the groups that he played with were going to lead him. But he mainly played because he could make more money playing in society bands,
Yeah.
either a quartet or an orchestra. But he was a total jazz drummer, and so I ended up playing country music my whole life pretty well.
Yeah.
I played when I lived in San Francisco. There was a time for a couple of years where I was doing society gigs and just a lot of regular suit and tie type gigs, but mostly it was all country. All my life, all my professional life has been playing country music pretty well, even though I did other styles of music, but it was predominantly country. When I lived in Canada, I didn't do any country, hardly any, other than in the studios, but I did the tuxedo scene, hotels and bar mitzvahs and what have you.
Yeah.
That's how I made my living when I was in Canada. And in the recording studios, I'd play country music, but that was about it.
Yeah. So going back to Beto, the cool thing about him is that he taught you to be a working drummer. He taught you
Exactly.
mambo, bolero, merengue,
Yeah.
foxtrots,
Yeah.
polkas, society.
Yeah.
He taught you everything so you could
Exactly.
be well-rounded, which is
Yeah.
really cool, which helped you in your life.
Yes, it did. It gave me versatility. I
Yeah.
became very versatile through that. And by being taught that way, it kept my mind open to other rhythms, and
Yeah.
just to music in general.
Like he was so important to your drumming.
Oh, he was.
Foundational to
Yeah. Without him, I don't know what would have happened, because he turned me into a professional musician. After going and sitting on jobs with him, right next to him and watching him and listening, eventually he started sending me as his sub because he couldn't cover everything.
Yeah.
So he started sending me, and that's how I started developing a reputation. And people used to, once I was in high school, people were calling me directly to do jobs because they knew I had studied with Beto and they knew what to expect. And the way I met Buck Owens and how that all transpired, you know, uh, was at a time when I was ready to leave home anyway and seek out my future, so to speak.
Yeah.
But instead of going to New York, I ended up going to California, which was okay,
Yeah.
It was probably the best. It was probably the best thing that could have happened to me. So that's all I can say.
Yeah.
I was a jazz snob because I thought that jazz was the only great music there was at that time, Other than playing in the symphony, jazz was the highest in terms of learning to play. It was the higher music of all that was popular at that time. It's no longer like that, but it used to be at one time because the best musicians were jazz musicians back then in the 60s. Not that, like you had your service marching bands, all the musicians that played in those bands, they were superior players. But you see, in my mind, it took a lot to be able to play jazz. And so that's what made it superiority complex kind of developed at a very young age. And also having older players talking about, nah, that's not good. Those guys can't play this, So therefore, I kind of became like them until I matured and was out on my own and saw that the world was really different. And it was changing all during those years, during Buck's years and after that. There were some big effects happening in music, especially rock and roll, all those bands in the 70s, from England, and also the American bands that were coming out. I think you know who I'm talking about. I don't have to mention names, but
Yeah.
the progression, the musical level of the rock and roll players had really come a long ways from the Ventures.
Yeah.
That was in the early 60s. That music was so simplistic that I really looked down on it, because it was so easy to play and anybody could play it. So I thought, but you live and learn and you find out that there's art everywhere.
So right before that, you started drumming for burlesque, right?
Well, yeah, while I was still in high school, well, there was a limited number of drum set players
Yeah.
in Corpus. And Beto was, like, you could say, the first call drummer that if anybody needed a drummer, they knew to call him. And if he couldn't do it, he would direct you in the right direction, where you could find someone. Other than myself, there were a couple of other guys older than me in town that also jobbed around. But I was, as I said, became very versatile, and I could, you know, anywhere musically you wanted me to go, I could go without a problem what can I say? Before long, I took over a lot of Beto's jobs because he just could not do them anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And I joined, ended up being the drummer in this orchestra, a Latin orchestra. You know, we played Mexican dances and what have you. And it was made up of some of the younger jazz players, Joe Gallardo and what have you. And even the gentlemen that were my band directors, Joe Medina Jr., who was alto saxophone player, excellent saxophone player. He was like the lead alto player in the big band. And also Eddie Galvan, who became my high school band director at Roy Miller High School. I played in this jazz quartet and also, you know, society quartet, you know, doing
Yeah.
hotel gigs and whatever. So, you know, to be playing with my band directors, well, that was a big honor for me. But, you know, I was kind of put in that position because there were no other players in town, you know, to fill in those spots. And it was good for me because of the experience that I got, you know, playing with musicians that have been professional for most of their lives.
Yeah.
So that in itself gave help, helped me develop my confidence in what I was able to do. It all kind of led me to Buck Owens, so to speak. You know, those kind of situations hardly happen anymore.
Yeah.
Those were things of the old days, where a band comes to town, they hear a younger musician play. That's what happened to Miles Davis, you know, and Charlie Parker and a lot of other people. Those are the old days. I'm kind of like at the tail end of that. And my dream at that time, when I was in high school, was to go to college and study with whoever was teaching jazz drumming. That was my dream, but it never happened. So I had to get my education in a different way. And through the years, I did go to 2 or 3 other teachers that helped me progress to a higher level. So it
That's
all
great.
worked out.
Yeah. So you're in Corpus Christi and you're jobbing around, as you said, gigging at all these different places while you're still going to school. And
Yeah.
you're start playing a country gig at the Maverick Club, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you come across Buck Owens. Could you explain that?
Well, that was like let's see, that happened in October and November that I was at the Maverick Club. What happened was one of my drummer friends, and he was 2 or 3 years older than me. He was going to North Texas State College, and he was studying with this drummer that I wanted to study with. His name was Tommy Gwynn. He had been like a big band drummer, and became very notable as a teacher. So that was one of my goals at that time. But anyway, my friend Don Sowell, unbeknownst to me, he had been working that summer. I don't know when the Maverick Club opened, but it hadn't been too long. And Don called me up one afternoon and he said, listen, they're needing a drummer at this club over North Beach. He says, it's country music. And I didn't know what country music was. And he said, so-and-so has done it. They don't like it. He passed it on to another so-and-so, and he didn't like it either. And I ended up with it. And now it's time for me to go back to college. Are you interested in it? And I said, sure, I'll do it, not knowing really what I was getting myself into. Because I grew up with the thought in mind that you never turn a job down, no matter what style of music it is. With that in mind, I took the job, and I was there for a couple of months. And during that time, I discovered what country music was sort of like, not only because of the band that I was playing with, but because of the records that was on the jukebox, which is Buck Owens, Ray Price, Jim Reeves, and possibly George Jones. But I remember mainly those three that I heard on the jukebox. And I thought, I like this, you know. I didn't care for the style of country that the band that I was in played. I mean, mind you, it was all new to me. And so I didn't really know what to think of it in the sense of if I liked it or not. I don't think I didn't like the way they dressed. Cowboy boots and hats and Western shirts and funny looking pants, you know. So they tried to get me to dress like that. And I remember one Saturday going out to several stores where they sell boots and stuff. This is mainly, you have to know, those kind of stores cater to farmers, okay?
Yeah.
The whole Western wear clothing, you had to go to a store that supplied goods like that to farmers. I remember we all bunched up in this car and rode around to two or three of these places trying to find boots and hats that all matched, and possibly shirts if possible. And I was never so happy to see that we couldn't find matching shirts or anything for the whole band. So I probably just wore jeans and a dress shirt of something, you know,
Yeah.
and didn't have to wear cowboy boots or a hat. And for the other guys, just wore what they had, and it was Western style, you know. The boots with the Thunderbird design on them, you know, that was popular at that time. And as it turned out, the owner of the club,
Don Presley.
Don Presley, and his wife Dottie, they supposedly were third cousins of Elvis's.
Yeah, I
I don't know.
looked that up, but there's nothing I'm not saying they aren't, but I couldn't find any.
Okay. Well, it could have been that maybe they just said that to give them some sort of credibility, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's good
but-
marketing.
Yeah. They were really very nice people, and he sang in the old style, like Hawkshaw Hawkins or Hank Williams, and
cool.
the band was more that older style of country.
Yeah.
A cross between Hank Thompson and Hank Williams, as the way I would put it, even though we had an electric bass player. It was, this is what I'm remembering, electric bass, and he was maybe 4 or 5 years older than me. He was from San Antonio, and I can't remember his name now. There was the leader, other than Don. This is the leader on the bandstand. Don was the club owner, and he also sang with the band. And there was a fiddle player. His name was they called him Petey, and his name, I think, was Peter David. And there was a lead guitar player that I swear he must have been on dope every night. He constantly was chewing gum, trying to be funny, you know, all night long by telling me little jokes. But you know, they were all nice people, and it was just like a strange little band, you know.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of culture shock for you, probably.
Yeah, it was. But apparently I can't remember what I played, but I'm thinking I played something like a swing type beat on the hi-hat and the ride cymbal, and they wanted to hear a backbeat on all the songs, and I didn't cross the
Sticks?
the stick. Yeah, I didn't. Like Buck Owens style of music. I don't remember ever doing that with that music. You know, I think they wanted to hear just a nice backbeat, kind of like the West, you know, Bob Wills style band.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like that. I fit in because, you know, Western swing comes from jazz, from the swing era.
Yeah.
They're connected. So I'm thinking that's how I got through that job, you know. But whatever I did, I must have done it well enough to impress Don Rich, who was Buck's right-hand man. And he's the one that told Buck about me to hire me, you know. So that's all I can say. That's how it happened. Buck never heard me play. After a month or so, well, we were almost 2 months now, in November, we were going to do a radio show on a Friday right at noon, which we did every week, and didn't do it because President Kennedy had been assassinated. And Buck was appearing at the club that night. And I don't think attendance was really poor that night. So he decided that he would play the whole band, the whole night with his band instead of originally we were supposed to alternate sets with Buck's band, and so that's why I was at the club. But then at the last minute, he said, "Listen, the way it's looking out there, we'll just play the whole night." Meaning, probably did 3 or 4 sets, and so I decided to stay there because I liked the music, the way his music sounded on the jukebox, and it sounded just as good live. And I was very impressed by their sound and the fact that I enjoyed it, and I never got bored listening to song after song. And also, Mel King, the drummer before me that was with Buck at that night, played the same beat, maybe different tempos, but the same sound, hi-hat and cross-stick, all night long. And I never noticed that it was the same beat, but I remember asking myself, it's not boring, so it must be the right thing that he's playing, If it sounds right, how can it be boring?
Yeah.
So that taught me something. That was a lesson from that night, And so I got to meet the band at the end of the night, and Buck and, of course, the whole rest of the guys, and Doyle Holly, the bass player, who had only been in the band maybe a couple of months before, is the one that approached me and asked me for my name and phone number, and would I be interested in coming out to California in case there were any developments, not necessarily with Buck, but I didn't know what it meant, at that point. And so that's how it started. And then in February of the following year, 1964, I got a call from Buck that first week, I remember, like on a Monday. I couldn't believe that he was actually calling me because I had never considered anything of like playing in a road band like that. So the first thing I told him was I needed permission from my parents to leave home, which I was planning on doing anyway within that year. I wanted to go to New York City and pursue my jazz interests, which never happened at that time. And so my parents gave me their blessing, and I called Buck back, and he said, "Well, I'll mail you some money, and you can fly out Saturday." That's how it started. I flew out there, and so
I should ask you. You joined the band. Do you remember what month it was of 1964?
Yeah, it was early February, probably the first week. Look at the date of when "Together Again" and "My Heart Skips a Beat" were recorded, and that's the day that I arrived in Bakersfield. It was on a Saturday. I remember it was on a Saturday because the band was in Hollywood recording those songs when I actually arrived in Bakersfield.
Wow.
So the wives, let's see, Don's wife, Marlene, and Tom's wife, and Buck's wife, Marlene and Rolene, that's funny. Tom's wife was Rolene, and Buck's wife, her name escapes me right now, Phyllis. And the Doyle's wife was not there, but so anyway, those three were at the airport to meet me. Phyllis informed me that Buck wanted me to stay out at the ranch, not to bother getting an apartment or anything, and so she showed me to my quarters once we got to the ranch, and that was like the beginning. I didn't see Buck for a couple of days. Once I got to the ranch and settled in, Phyllis came out with a stack of records, half a dozen, 12 records. I don't know how many records Buck had done by that time, LPs.
Yeah.
And she told me that Buck wanted me to listen to the records because he didn't know just how much of his music I had heard. And of course, I hadn't heard anything else other than just what I heard that night, which, I mean, I didn't know any of the songs, but the only thing that I'd heard on the jukebox was either Act Naturally or Love's Gonna Live Here. I forget which one was out at that particular the previous year that was out as on
Yeah.
the jukebox. So maybe both of them were. But anyway, so I spent the afternoon listening to recordings and just noticing how basically everything was based on that shuffle beat. Various ways of playing it because each record had a different drummer on it, and so it gave me some ideas. Some drummers played all brushes, some played brushing a stick, and the more current ones before me played sticks only. It gave me some ideas in terms of what had happened in the songs before, which were all basically shuffle based. So that cleared my mind, and it figured that would be easy enough for me to cover. I came into his band right in the February of 1964, just as he was starting to really break big time. He'd had a couple of hits, Act Naturally and Love's Gonna Live Here, I believe. And when I came in, the next things that followed were I Don't Care and Crying Time, which I happened to be the drummer. And that was also my first venture into the studio, especially with someone that was on the rise. When I arrived in Bakersfield that Saturday, they were in LA, actually Hollywood, at Capitol Records. So it was a couple of days before, and I stayed out at the ranch. Other than Buck, seeing him at breakfast, and then maybe an hour or two later, Merle Haggard and Bonnie Owens show up with a recording that they wanted to play Buck and get his opinion. That's when I first heard of Merle Haggard. Both those two men, all of a sudden, the same day, I had no clue that Merle would become such a big item, in years to come.
Yeah.
But I felt all along that he deserved it because he definitely had developed a unique style as well.
I think one thing that was different is that he really had some deep stories in his songs that were like narratives almost that a lot of other people didn't do.
Exactly. But a funny thing, the way Buck was, and Don was like the go-between. Okay, he was the next youngest in the band. He was like 5-6 years older than me.
Yeah.
Okay, and so he kind of like became, really close because I turned him on to a lot of jazz things, and he didn't necessarily like everything, but at least he would listen. And he incorporated a lot from other guitarists that played other styles of music, not just rock and roll, but like the Beatles. He would be influenced by a lot of different things, and he was like a melting pot. He took the Buck Owens guitar style and added a different dimension to it. And people don't know, a lot of guitar players here in Nashville think that the Don Rich originated that style and I have to remind them that Buck Owens was really the original because he was a guitar player to begin with.
Yeah, he was a studio musician. He was really good. He played other styles too.
Yeah, but not jazz in the sense of modern jazz. His jazz that he liked was more swing era jazz.
Yeah.
Heavy
like
melodic.
Miller.
Like Lionel Hampton. He told me was one of his favorites. He didn't criticize me for listening to what I listened to. He just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And he would tell me, he knew that what I listened to influenced me well enough to help me improve. And he wanted to have musicians in the band that were like that. They were wanting to surge ahead and try new things. You see, that's what he was into without having to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, one of the things that I introduced was sitar.
Oh, that's
know,
cool. Yeah, I
from
know
India.
sitar.
And
I remember I learned about it from the Beatles, you know.
well, yes, but I had heard it through another musician in Bakersfield.
Oh.
Uh, uh, this jazz saxophonist had a girlfriend that was a school teacher.
Oh yeah, I want to know about the jazz scene in Bakersfield. What
Well,
the
there was.
was it a club called the Squeeze?
I don't remember
Okay.
that name. I do remember that the first jazz musician or the first musician I met was my first day in Bakersfield.
That's awesome.
So I was at the ranch, okay,
Yeah.
and with Buck's family. He had two sons and a daughter, and so I didn't realize how far outside of Bakersfield he was, like maybe 20 miles or so. And I said to his wife, Phyllis, I said, "How far is Bakersfield?" And he says, "Oh, pretty far." I said, "Well, maybe I can run go down to the highway, which is maybe like a mile down from where they were, and catch a bus." And she says, "There's no buses running on Sunday, especially all the way out here." And I said, "Well, I feel like I need to go for a walk, and if I can find Bakersfield, you know, that's where I want to go. I want to see what it's like." And she says,
Yeah.
"Well, you're welcome to walk all the way there if you want." And you see, I grew up walking everywhere in Texas. I didn't let the fact that I didn't drive a car or did not have money to ride the bus. If I wanted to go somewhere, I would just go and find it. That's how I grew up. And that's how me and my friends were. We were adventuresome and just took off for the day. And my
Yeah.
parents wouldn't see us all day long until supper time. And that was okay so long as we came home. So it was no big thing for me to take off. And it was let me tell you, it was a really hot day. And so within a few miles from Buck's Ranch, I was on the main highway to Bakersfield, and I saw a convenient gas store. And so I went in there to take a break and maybe have a Coke. And as I was walking towards the door, I noticed this gentleman gassing up, and I thought he had these kind of sunglasses that made him look like he was blind. And I thought I haven't seen sunglasses like that. So he caught my eye. So anyway, I didn't say anything to him. I walked in, got me a drink, and I started talking to the attendant in there about why, that being my first day in Bakersfield, and I was going to be Buck Owens' new drummer and be in the band and this and that, and trying to make my way to Bakersfield just so that I'll spend the day. And we were talking, and in the meantime, this person that was outside with those sunglasses walked in, and he said, "Did I hear you mention Buck Owens?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "So I'm Rick Perez is his name, and he played tenor saxophone, and he had a regular day job, but he loved John Coltrane. So the connection was going to be there." Because that's who my favorite band was at that particular time, was Elvin Jones with John Coltrane. And he was totally into Coltrane. We started talking, and he said, "So you're going to walk all the way downtown?" He says, "Well, it's going to take you all day long." I says, "I'm going back home. Why don't I give you a ride downtown, and I'll drive you around Bakersfield so you can see it, and then I'll bring you back to the ranch, where you're staying." So I said, "Well, okay." I mean, he seemed trustworthy, and I was willing. And so we became like the best of friends. But that was the beginning, because he introduced me to the jazz musicians. Whenever
Yeah.
I was in town, I'd call him up, and he'd come get me, and we'd go hit some of the clubs. And oh, he was a great player then. Uh, I might have set in, a few times, but I just wanted to hear and see what was going on in Bakersfield.
He became a legend here, a local legend playing the
Uh huh.
saxophone.
Okay.
For 70 years, he was playing gigs here.
Oh, great. Well, I think he lived there all his life. And he introduced me to someone that would become a really good friend as well as him, Wolfgang Melz. He was from Germany, and he was a electric bass player. He didn't play acoustic. All he played was electric, and he played jazz on the electric, which wasn't a common thing at that particular time. And he was in town working at a Holiday Inn with a group from wherever I don't remember where they came from, probably the East Coast, I'm thinking. And they had been there maybe a year or so. So they had this long-standing contract at the Holiday Inn in Bakersfield to be the house band. So as it turned out, maybe after a couple of months or so, I decided that I needed to get my own place, and Wolf helped me find something, which happened to be like about a block away from his home, and so that was convenient because we became better friends, and we used to get together and jam together, just bass and drums. And also, my first car that I owned in Bakersfield belonged to his girlfriend. They both had MGA sports cars, which were a British car, and hers had been sitting in the back of the apartment. Uh, just hadn't been run in a long time, so I got a really good deal on it, and I bought it, and that was my introduction to sports cars. So,
Wow.
so anyway, so that in regards to uh, Wolf and I. Like I said, became really good friends. And we used to listen to records together and talk about music and this and that. And I would go out to maybe the place that he played at and listen. I never did sit in, but different times, a lot of times I would go with either with him or with Rick, you know. And since Wolf was working on every night pretty well, I think it was more often with. I mean, Wolf was working every night, so Rick and I would go out and to several places, and he would introduce me to some of the musicians in town and drummers. And so that's how I kind of got started in Bakersfield, sitting in with groups that he, used to go sit in with. And so that was kind of like my life outside of country music, in Bakersfield, and slowly getting to know the Bakersfield jazz players.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like I said, it's cool that you were friends with Richie Perez because he
Uh-huh.
stayed here playing for 70 years, doing gigs here.
How many
So it's
years?
really
You said?
awesome. He was doing gigs for 70 years. He had a 70-year
Seven,
career.
70.
Yeah, he played tenor
Okay.
saxophone. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
So I knew that I pretty well knew that he was from Bakersfield, and I knew he was married and had quite a large family. That's about as much as I recall of him. I never met his family that I can remember, because usually he would come by to pick me up, and we would go to clubs and stuff, and that was basically it.
Yeah.
That's the only times I saw him.
Do you remember the names of any of those clubs back then?
No, the only ones that I remember are the ones that had country music, like
Yeah.
the Barrel House. I think Bonnie Owens and the drummer that became his Merle Haggard's regular drummer years later, when he finally got his career off the ground and formed his own band, Bob Gallardo. They pronounce it Gallardo, but I think it's Gallardo.
Yeah.
He might have had only one L, so it would have been Gallardo. But I've never heard of a Spanish name of Gallardo. I've known Gallardos. So there was him, and then there was at the Barrel House, and then the other place that I went to, uh, the Blackboard, I think.
Yeah, the Blackboard and Texas Barrel House. Those were two honky tonks. How often
Well,
did you play honky tonks when you were in town? Because you were
I never,
touring a lot, right?
yeah, I never did.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think it took me a long time. I mean, I'd been in Bakersfield maybe a couple of years before I actually went to any of the country places. One, the Blackboard, I only went out. I was there just once, mainly because we had backed Rose Maddox. You know who Rose Maddox was?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we used to back her up on the road from time to time. And somehow this one time she happened to be in Bakersfield, and I got a phone call from her asking me to come out to the Blackboard where she was and several other people in her entourage. I don't recall who all it was. And she says, they want me to sit in here with the band, and I don't want to sit, I don't want to play with this drummer, so can you come out and play behind me? And I just happened to be home doing nothing. And so I said, excuse me, okay, I'll come out. So within an hour, I think I went out there, and then she agreed to get up, but she wasn't going to get up until I was there.
Wow.
So and that's the only time I was ever in there and got to meet the local players. I don't remember who it was. And so that was my only time there. And then another time, I don't know, I might have been with Rick, and we just maybe drove by the Barrel House and decided to go in. And I think I knew Bonnie was working there. She also toured with Buck's entourage on the road. And so I might have found out that's where she worked when she was in town. And that's why I stopped by there just to hear the band and, and meet some of the guys. And that was about it. But I never worked any of the places. Nobody ever called me. I didn't know any of the Bakersfield musicians, so to speak. The only jobs I did were outside country music. They were
Yeah.
more jazz oriented. There was another saxophonist that I met after I'd been there for a couple of years, and I don't recall his name, but I remember um, when I had a car, or maybe he would come over and pick me up, me and my drums, because I had a two-seater, and so therefore I really didn't have room for a drum set to go do any jobs, So
Yeah.
if anytime I did any jobs with anyone, they would come by and get me, you know. And he was a really good jazz saxophone player too. Actually, it was being with him and going to his girlfriend's home before going to a job that I first heard music from India that was being played while I was waiting, and it was Ravi Shankar, and that I had never heard such a sound before. And this before the Beatles came out with their Rubber Soul album with the Indian
A sitar? Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is Ravi Shankar, and the tabla player was a young man that died very young. Chatur Lal was his name. And any chance I got, either in Bakersfield or any big cities, I would search out their albums. It took me a long time before I actually found a Ravi Shankar album, and pretty well got, really hooked on that music. And it just kind of just opened up my mind musically and rhythmically what was happening. So that was a good thing. I also played several black clubs with this saxophone player. He was black, and so I got to meet some of the black players in town. And one of the drummers that I met at that time, I remember, I don't recall his name, but he had just gotten off the road working with James Brown. So just hanging out, talking drums, and and whatever,
That's
and
cool.
so I did maybe organ trio uh, gigs with a saxophonist, you know, and that was about it. Those other that I can recall. I wasn't in town that much. That's all I recall ever doing.
Do you know if you ever played at the Cotton Club or the Squeeze?
No, that those names don't. Every city sends
Has a
town.
Cotton Club?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Even there was one in Corpus, I believe, maybe.
Yeah,
I
we
know there
had a
was.
club called the Cotton Club, and it was
Hmm.
actually in like the official stop for the Chitlin Circuit. When the Chitlin
Uh-huh.
Circuit would go from
Yeah.
LA to Fresno or whatever, they would always stop here or there.
Okay. So were they organ trios?
Uh I don't know about Oregon trios. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Because that was real popular back in the 60s. I know in Corpus at the Downbeat Club, they had a organ trio or quartet, maybe
Wow.
with a guitar player, but that's what I recall. And this one singer that I played with quite often, her name was Jewel King. You might want to look her name up. Uh, she lived in Corpus and worked a lot there, but I don't know where she was really from originally. But she liked having me playing on drums, so I worked with her from time to time. Jewel King was her name.
All
And
right.
actually, she's the one that I stopped to see on my last night in Bakersfield. You know the story I told you about having a run in with the cops almost
Oh, I don't
the night.
remember that one.
Yeah, I told you that story. Before leaving Corpus, I went out the night before to say goodbye to friends and a
Oh,
couple of.
yes, yes. I thought you said the
So
night you left Bakersfield and I was confused, but yeah,
no,
I know
no,
what you're
no,
talking
no.
about.
I'm in Corpus. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, so so that's who it was and actually, well, she was a pianist organ player that I
Wow.
recall.
That's cool.
There was another place I just now remembered. It was called Amos and Andy's, and it was a strictly all black club that I'm recalling. So
And that's in Corpus again?
yeah, yeah, Corpus.
Yeah. Did you have any culture shock having to come to Bakersfield after living in Texas your whole
Yeah,
life?
yes, especially working with an Anglo band.
Yeah.
I'm of Mexican heritage, and so I had played, professionally the country club where you wear a suit and bow tie, and usually mainly they were Anglo affairs. And there might have been some Hispanic people there. I don't know.
Well, it was still a lot of segregation back then.
Yeah, yeah, but usually, the private clubs were usually people with money, big
Yeah.
money, and it didn't matter if you were Mexican or Anglo or black. If you belong to the club, you belong to the club. That's just the way it was. Those are the kind of gigs that my teacher used to send me on because they were jobs that he had originally played himself, but he was just one person compared to several people that used to call him for, to do jobs with. And so I became his second. And so I was exposed to that type of environment, you know, which was a very what we call straight type of environment. Uh, Even though they got drunk and everything on champagne and whatever, it was their chance of having a good time,
Yeah.
And so it was my job to play in the band and make everybody happy.
So
So
I guess we should mention, just in case people listen that aren't too familiar with the Buckaroos. So obviously you had Buck Owens, who's the singer. You have Don Rich, who is a guitarist, sometimes fiddle player.
And
You have
harmony singer.
Harmony. That's right, harmony singer Doyle Hawley, who's the bassist, and he did the low harmony sometimes.
Yeah,
You had Tom Brumley, who was the steel guitar player,
that's correct.
and you had you, Willie Cantu, on the drums.
Yes, and I didn't sing at all. And I still don't. We were all different individuals, and I could see that without even having to think about it, because it was very obvious that lifestyle, we were all different parts, especially me.
Yeah.
I was the more different than them, and which was okay. They treated me just like a brother, and so did Buck. He never looked at me as a teenager or anything else other than just his drummer. So long as I performed at the level that I needed to with the band, that's all that mattered, and that's all I can say. AJ, thanks so much, man, and look forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, you take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for tuning us in. Be sure and look for us every time you get a chance. Foreman, come on in here. Bud Mathis and Lance Foreman. Kay Adams. Tommy Collins got his. He said he's going to get his. Thank you so much for being so nice to us. We'll see you next time. Bye.